Picture this: a lavish mansion bathed in moonlight, crystal chandeliers reflecting shattered dreams, and an heirloom ring tossed aside in bitter betrayal. Billionaire Alexander Reeves, once the envy of high society, has just done the unthinkable. He's thrown his pregnant wife, Olivia, onto the streets, all because of a whisper from his irresistible mistress, Cassandra, who claims the baby in Olivia's womb isn't his. Yet beneath the sparkle of diamonds and the hush of secrets, one final twist waits in the maternity ward. Tonight, as hearts break and fortunes shift, a single DNA test is about to expose a devastating lie. Alexander Reeves had always been surrounded by brilliance. Born into old money, he expanded his ancestral shipping empire into a global conglomerate. By the age of 30, he had rubbed shoulders with magnates like Bill Gates at exclusive charitable galas, garnering headlines for his philanthropic endeavors alongside his keen business acumen. People who saw him only from afar believed his life was a shining example of success, a testament to the perfect marriage of wealth and strategy. His family estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was a sprawling property that had once hosted a private dinner for a handful of international dignitaries. High garden hedges, ornate fountains, and marble statues welcomed guests into a world that felt more like a modern Versailles than a mere residence. Alexander's father, the late Jonathan Reeves, had built the estate from the ground up, an outward symbol of what he believed the Reeves name stood for: prestige, integrity, and legacy. Alexander, or Alex to his close friends, inherited not just the estate, but the dreams etched into every marble pillar. He had a strong sense of responsibility that extended beyond mere profit. He wanted his family name to stand for innovation, charity, and high moral values. For years, that was exactly how he conducted his life. Under his leadership, Reeves Global diversified into energy technology and real estate. Stock prices soared, and the Reeves family became a staple in the pages of business magazines. In one of those bright intervals, while attending a philanthropic event at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Alexander's path collided with Olivia Sinclair. Olivia was a soft-spoken graduate student of art history present that evening to present a thesis on the museum's rare Renaissance collection. Her understated elegance caught his eye. She wore a simple midnight blue gown that highlighted her quiet sophistication, a stark contrast to the glittering over-the-top attire of other attendees. Intrigued, Alexander found himself drawn away from investor conversations and the usual small talk, with high society fixtures inching closer to the modest stage where Olivia spoke with passion about Botticelli and Raphael. Despite living in a sphere of powerful men and cunning socialites, Alexander had never found anyone who touched him on an intellectual and emotional level. But listening to Olivia's voice, he felt something shift in his chest, a subtle awakening. Their first conversation was awkward. He introduced himself with more nervousness than he'd ever shown at board meetings. Olivia, unaccustomed to the attention of someone so prominent, blushed, but held her composure. Over the next weeks, chance meetings turned into deliberate visits. Soon they were courting in a haze of late-night phone calls, secret glances across crowded rooms, and stolen weekends in the Hamptons. Olivia wasn't born into wealth. Her father was a retired school teacher, and her mother stayed at home, dedicating her life to her children's upbringing. The Sinclair family's warmth and genuine affection touched Alexander, who found respite in their cozy suburban home, a stark contrast to his own life of grandeur. He admired Olivia's strong moral compass and her unwavering sincerity. Within a year, the tabloids were abuzz with rumors of an engagement, And sure enough, Alexander proposed in a private garden at the Reeves estate, kneeling under flickering fairy lights and the summer moon. Their wedding took place on a crisp fall afternoon in that very garden. The event was small by Billionaire standards, 100 guests, close friends and family. Olivia insisted on modesty, and Alexander was more than happy to comply. It felt intimate, loving and real, precisely the kind of marriage ceremony that matched the hopes he had for their future. For almost 2 years, Alexander's life was the embodiment of success, a thriving business, a respectful presence in philanthropic circles, and a loving partner by his side. Olivia pursued her doctoral studies while offering her own gentle input into Reeves Global's charitable initiatives, focusing particularly on educational programs for underprivileged children. Their synergy, he as the business strategist, she as the empathetic visionary, was lauded by friends and peers alike. Yet even in the most splendid of palaces, shadows gather in the corners. Beneath the surface of their picturesque marriage, tensions were brewing, pressures from Alexander's business expansions, from the swirling demands of high society, and from people who envied Olivia's privileged new life. Among them was a woman who had once been just a face in the crowd, but was destined to play a pivotal role in shattering the idyllic world Alexander and Olivia had built. That woman was Cassandra Hawthorne, young, ambitious, and dangerously charming. She had her sights set on the glimmering heights Alexander inhabited, and she wasn't about to let another woman stand in her way. A few months after their second wedding anniversary, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. Overjoyed, she planned a discreet surprise for Alexander, carefully arranging an ultrasound photo inside a handwritten card. She expected her husband to be thrilled. He had spoken often of wanting a big family, reminiscent of his own upbringing. Indeed, when he opened the card that evening after returning from a grueling day at the office, his face lit up like fireworks on the 4th of July. He hugged Olivia, spun her around gently, and for a moment, all the world seemed to fade, but for their whispered excitement. Yet in the days that followed, Alexander's bliss appeared tempered by an undercurrent of tension that Olivia couldn't quite place. At first, she chalked it up to the demands of his sprawling empire. Reeves Global had acquired a significant stake in a tech startup, rumored to be on the verge of a medical breakthrough, and the media attention was relentless. Investors hung on every word Alexander said, and any misstep could lead to catastrophic financial loss. The stakes felt higher than ever. In the midst of these pressures, Alexander's behavior toward Olivia began to shift. He started coming home later than usual, sometimes past midnight. When Olivia voiced her concern, he'd assure her it was just a rough patch at work. But there was a distant something intangible that began to wedge itself between them. She would find him sitting in his private study, staring at documents or on hushed phone calls that ended abruptly the moment she walked in. One evening, while organizing Alexander's desk, something she rarely did, but she wanted to help him reduce clutter, Olivia stumbled across a small silver key. It didn't fit any lock in the mansion or the office that she knew of. Curiosity pricked at her, and a sense of unease fluttered in her stomach. She placed the key back in the drawer, resolving to trust her husband. Yet the discovery lingered in her thoughts, stirring questions she wasn't ready to confront. While Olivia was navigating this new emotional turbulence, Cassandra Hawthorne made her unassuming entrance into their marital narrative. She was introduced to Alexander by a mutual contact at Reeves Global. Someone in the marketing department had suggested Cassandra's PR firm to help manage the increasingly high-profile deals the company was undertaking. An initial meeting in the swanky lounge of the St. Regis Hotel had Alexander intrigued by her confident demeanor and her seemingly vast network of media connections. For a few weeks, Cassandra remained a background figure, quietly offering her expertise in press releases and media strategy. Gradually, however, she began to ensconce herself in Alexander's daily routine. She showed up at the Reeves Global HQ in Midtown Manhattan, more often always impeccably dressed in tailored suits that complemented her sharp features. She knew just how to lean in, how to toss her hair, and give Alexander a fleeting smile that stirred a man's desire for admiration and respect. Where Olivia was gentle and subdued, Cassandra was flamboyant and charming. She was the type to waltz into a room and immediately own it. Beneath that veneer of professional brilliance, though, was an ambition that bordered on predatory. She spotted Alexander's vulnerabilities. His stress over the looming corporate deals, his yearning for something undefined, his frustration with not being able to be the ideal husband 24/7. She made herself indispensable, offering a sympathetic ear when he ranted about near-impossible deadlines, boardroom politics, or even inconsequential arguments with Olivia over dinner. He confided in Cassandra in ways he had long neglected to do with his own wife. And while there was nothing overtly physical between them at first, emotional infidelity was a storm gathering on the horizon. Alexander told himself he simply admired Cassandra's drive, that her presence was a breath of fresh air amid a life burdened by constant responsibilities. He convinced himself that it was just professional synergy, an alignment of minds in a cutthroat business world. Olivia, however, could sense the shift in the atmosphere as though a cold breeze had slithered into the house. Their once vibrant conversations at the dining table dwindled. Alexander often seemed preoccupied, glued to his phone or laptop occasionally, with a half-smile tugging at his lips, a smile Olivia had not been the cause of. On the nights when he came home, especially late, he reeked of expensive perfume, one that did not belong to her. She tried to push the thought away. Perhaps it was from a colleague's embrace at some business function. Yet the unease was now a constant hum in the back of her mind, creating hairline cracks in her trust. Around that time, Olivia started experiencing complications with her pregnancy. She felt bouts of dizziness, and her OB/GYN recommended more bed rest. Torn between wanting to keep up with her doctoral research and needing to care for herself, she withdrew from some social commitments. This unintentional retreat left a vacuum that Cassandra subtly filled attending parties on Alexander's arm, under the guise of business representation. Family friends like Elizabeth Harrington, a close confidant of the Reeves clan, began to notice the unusual dynamic. Whispered comments filled the corners of high society gatherings, while paparazzi occasionally snapped photos of Alexander and Cassandra together, fueling gossip columns. Olivia, for her part, tried to remain stoic, clinging to the hope that the man she loved wouldn't betray her. But as the small cracks grew, she couldn't ignore the dread growing in her heart. As the first trimester transitioned into the second, Olivia's body changed, and with it, her emotional fragility increased. She was glowing, but stress and confusion often haunted her eyes. Even in her weakened state, she tried to salvage her marriage. She scheduled a weekend getaway to their lake house in upstate New York, hoping a short retreat from the demands of the city would clear the air. Alexander, however, kept postponing the trip with last-minute excuses. A critical meeting in Dubai, a sudden market crisis that needed his personal attention, and so forth. Those around Olivia noticed her struggle. Her best friend from college, Rachel Sanders, visited more frequently. Rachel, a tough-minded lawyer, believed in confronting issues head-on. One afternoon, she found Olivia in the greenhouse, gently pruning roses. Concern evident in her voice, Rachel asked, "Have you talked to him about Cassandra?" Olivia hesitated, her eyes fixed on the budding roses. Not directly. I don't want to sound paranoid or accusatory. He's under so much pressure lately." Rachel's voice took on a firm edge. "You're his wife, Liv. This marriage is supposed to be your safe haven. You can't just ignore that something is off." Taking a shaky breath, Olivia nodded. "I just don't know how to approach it without pushing him further away." Meanwhile, Alexander was a whirlwind of professional engagements and personal temptations. Cassandra had found ways to slip into his daily life, coffee runs that turned into lingering lunches, strategic late-night dinners in private back rooms of Manhattan's finest restaurants. She always had the perfect excuse to be near him. A new media lead, a critical press release that needed immediate approval, a philanthropic event that aligned with Reeves Global's brand. It didn't help that the business deals Alexander was juggling had become more complex. The rumored medical breakthrough by the tech startup they'd acquired was coming to fruition, attracting global attention. Billionaire investors from the Middle East to Silicon Valley were knocking on his door. The pressure to secure partnerships was immense, and Alexander found a constant confidant in Cassandra. She had a knack for lifting some of that weight off his shoulders, reminding him to live in the moment, encouraging him to have that extra glass of champagne, or to let himself indulge in fleeting amusements. The personal boundary that separated their professional relationship from an emotional entanglement gradually disappeared. Late one evening, after celebrating the finalization of a multi-million-dollar contract, Cassandra and Alexander found themselves in a penthouse suite overlooking Central Park. A swirl of Music City lights and the dizzying rush of victory blurred their judgment. Under the glow of a crystal chandelier, Cassandra leaned in, her lips brushed against his ear, whispering something about how he deserved to be truly happy, how she admired not just his mind, but his heart words that sank into the cracks in Alexander's composure. That night he crossed the line he had believed he would never approach. The guilt was instantaneous, yet overshadowed by the intoxication of a newfound connection. He rationalized it in 1,000 ways: stress relief, momentary lapse, the pressing demands of a life lived in the spotlight. He convinced himself he would end it the next day, go back to Olivia, and work to rebuild the trust he'd shattered. But desire, once awakened, isn't so easily put back to sleep. Cassandra, for her part, had no intention of remaining a fleeting affair. She saw in Alexander a passport to the life she'd always craved, a place among the business elite, acceptance into the kind of circles where wealth and power are passed around like delicate hors d'oeuvres. She intensified her hold on him, playing the role of the supportive partner he didn't realize he was seeking. She listened, she validated, she made him feel invincible. Over time, Alexander began to believe that Cassandra, not Olivia, understood him best. Back in Greenwich, Olivia's loneliness grew. She tried to reach Alexander with phone calls, texts, emails. Some were answered curtly, others not at all. When she spoke to him about attending doctor's appointments together, he apologized profusely, but rarely showed up. He'd send elaborate bouquets to the mansion, complete with notes that read, "I'm sorry. Important meeting came up. Love you." But the absence of his physical presence spoke louder than any flowers or apology. On a chilly autumn day, as the leaves turned golden and the estate's gardens were awash in an amber glow, Olivia ventured into Alexander's study once more. She needed some financial documents for a charitable program they were co-sponsoring. Opening a drawer, she discovered a folder labeled Hawthorne PR Confidential. Inside were receipts for dinners, hotel bookings, and even a spa retreat in the Caribbean, none of which matched the dates or locations Alexander had ever mentioned to her. Her hands trembled. A cold dread seeped into her chest. She let the documents slip back into the folder and closed the drawer, her heart pounding like a war drum. Confrontation was now inevitable. Whatever illusions she had clung to for months had shattered the moment she saw those receipts. Betrayal was staring her in the face, and there was no looking away. Cassandra Hawthorne was a master weaver of illusions. Born into a modest family in suburban Chicago, she'd learned early on that the world belonged to those who seized opportunities. Her success story was part ambition, part ruthlessness. She had studied communications at a second-tier college before swiftly landing in PR firms that handled local celebrities. Over the years, she sharpened her talents, learning how to spin a narrative, how to manipulate social media, and how to craft an image so pristine that even the ugliest truths would disappear behind a polished smile. By the time she moved to New York, Cassandra had reinvented herself several times. She burned bridges when they became obsolete, always trading up to a new circle of influence. Her partnership with Reeves Global marked her biggest leap yet. She'd never had such direct access to a billionaire who was not only wealthy, but relatively naive to the darker side of human intention. Alexander Reeves in her eyes was the golden goose. At first she flirted with him lightly, gauging how he reacted to her witty banter and subtle touches. When she sensed his guard was down, she inched forward, offering glimpses of her personal struggles, a controlling ex-boyfriend, a father who never supported her dreams. She feigned vulnerability, projecting a sense of depth that intrigued Alexander. The night they spent together in the penthouse suite was more than just a fleeting affair for Cassandra. It was her official entry point into Alexander's life. After that, she began visiting his office unannounced, standing behind his chair during conference calls, stroking his shoulders as if she already owned him. She would surreptitiously remove any personal mementos, photos of Olivia, or little keepsakes if they stood in her line of sight. She offered him fresh insights into running the business's public relations, claiming her approach was modern, bold, and exactly what Reeves Global needed to stay on top. Alexander, clouded by dizza and guilt, found himself simultaneously enthralled and uneasy. He tried to compartmentalize, telling himself that sex was sex, that Cassandra's presence was a professional necessity. But Cassandra wanted more. She began introducing him to her circle of friends, people who worshipped her social climbing talents. They flattered Alexander, telling him he deserved a more exciting partner, someone who wasn't always at home or bogged down by boring philanthropic stuff. The subtler message was always the same. Cassandra complimented his success in ways Olivia never could. Amid this whirlwind, Cassandra started laying the groundwork for the ultimate trap. She complained about feeling nauseous in the mornings, but insisted it was just anxiety or too many late-night cocktails. She made sure Alexander found pregnancy tests in her purse or glimpsed doctor appointments marked in her calendar. When he finally asked her about it, she feigned shock tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm not sure yet," she whispered. "I don't want to scare you. But there's a possibility." She trailed off. The effect was immediate. Alexander paled, then tried to console her, his voice shaking. "We'll figure it out together." In truth, Cassandra's claim of pregnancy was a complete fabrication. She'd discovered Alexander's own wife was pregnant from gossip in the circle, so she twisted that information to her advantage, planting seeds of doubt in his mind. "How do you know Olivia's baby is really yours?" She was spending so much time away traveling for her doctoral research. She mentioned casually, as if it were a passing thought. The insinuation was enough. Alexander, already overwhelmed by shame and confusion, became paranoid. He remembered minor quarrels with Olivia over her constant library visits or weekend academic conferences. Could it be no, she wouldn't, but the possibility nagged at him. The final push came when Cassandra orchestrated a meeting between Alexander and one of her friends, a man who posed as a private investigator. During a staged conversation, the man subtly implied that Olivia had been seen with another man in the city. When Alexander demanded proof, the man mumbled about not wanting to break professional protocols, but let slip enough suggestive details to feed Alexander's fears. Cassandra feigned concern, offering to hire a real private investigator if Alexander wanted. She suggested with theatrical reluctance, maybe a paternity test, just to be sure. I hate saying this, but for your peace of mind. From that moment, Alexander's trust in Olivia cracked wide open. He became distant suspicious. He began to regard her every action with doubt, even as she endured her high-risk pregnancy and emotional turmoil. Unbeknownst to him, Cassandra had readied the final card up her sleeve, a scenario that would position her as the legitimate mother of his child, displacing Olivia entirely. But life, with all its ironies, had its own plans. Sometimes the truth demands to be heard, no matter how carefully one tries to hide it. One stormy evening, with rain lashing the mansion's tall windows, Olivia found Alexander pacing in the foyer. His posture was rigid, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and torment. For a second, she thought he was distressed about a business crisis. But when he spoke, his voice cracked with accusations she never imagined hearing from him. "Is it mine?" he asked, gesturing at her swollen belly. The words seemed to echo off the marble floors, bouncing back at them in a haunting refrain. Her heart sank. She could barely muster a response. "Alex, what are you talking about?" He ran a hand through his hair, eyes wild. "I want to know if this child is mine, or if you've been seeing someone else behind my back." Olivia stared at him, stunned into silence. Then the shock gave way to tears that brimmed in her eyes. She demanded to know what brought on such a ridiculous accusation. But his only answers were half-coherent snippets about her travels, her late study sessions, and the fact that others had noticed strange behavior. Realizing that he was parroting someone else's script, Olivia's face hardened. She thought of Cassandra's name, the intangible presence that had grown like a weed in their marriage. "I've never betrayed you," she said softly, her voice quivering. "How dare you even suggest it?" Alexander's fury climaxed, fueled by Cassandra's manipulations and his own moral downfall. He stormed into his study, hurling open drawers and rummaging through stacks of documents. Finally, he produced an envelope with pictures. They were innocent photos of Olivia at a cafe laughing with a male colleague from her university, but taken from awkward angles that suggested secrecy. "Explain these," he demanded. Olivia recognized her colleague, Dr. Thomas Waverley, a married professor who had been helping her with her thesis. She was speechless at how mundane outings were being twisted into a damning narrative. She tried to speak, but her voice faltered. In that moment, she realized how deep Alexander's mistrust ran. This wasn't just about questionable photos. This was about a man who had been manipulated to believe a lie. The argument exploded into a storm of accusations, tears, and raised voices. Alexander, consumed by jealousy and guilt, claimed he wanted a paternity test to confirm the child's identity. He hurled cutting remarks that left Olivia trembling. In her heartbreak and anger, she confronted him about Cassandra. She brandished the folder she'd discovered weeks before, demanding to know if he'd been faithful. Faced with the evidence of his clandestine dinners and trips with Cassandra, Alexander flinched. He stuttered. "It's not what it looks like," in that classic refrain used by unfaithful partners who can't formulate a better lie. Olivia's eyes shone with tears, each drop reflecting the betrayal she felt. "You have no right to question my fidelity," she spat, her voice cracking. When you've clearly forgotten your vows? Something about her direct accusation snapped the last thread of Alexander's composure. Feeling cornered both in his moral failings and emotional confusion, he reacted in the cruelest way possible. He demanded she leave. "This is my home, my estate," he said, his tone icier than the torrents of rain outside. "If you can't prove your loyalty, then get out." For a moment, Olivia stood still, her breath hitching. She waited for him to realize the insanity of his words, for the old Alexander to reappear, the one who cherished her. Instead, he turned away, burying his trembling hands in his pockets. She saw the faintest hint of remorse in his eyes, but it was overshadowed by stubborn pride and the illusions Cassandra had woven. Determined to preserve her dignity, Olivia packed what she could in a single suitcase. She refused to beg or plead. A small part of her held on to the hope that he would come to his senses at the last second. But the thunderous silence that filled the hallway proved otherwise. She paused in front of him, her head held high despite the tears on her cheeks. "I didn't betray you," she whispered, her voice catching. "You're throwing away something real for a lie. One day you'll regret this." She left the mansion, stepping into the swirling storm, with nothing but her unborn child, and a heart full of unanswered questions. Alexander watched from the front door, thunder cracking overhead. A cold dread seeped into his chest, but he hardened himself against it. He closed the door to the raging storm, and unwittingly to the woman who had loved him without question. In the weeks following her abrupt expulsion from the Reeves estate, Olivia retreated to her parents' modest home in suburban Connecticut. The house was a far cry from the opulent mansion she had grown accustomed to. It smelled of freshly baked bread and old wooden furniture. Sunlight streamed through lace curtains onto well-worn carpets, a comforting tableau from her childhood. For her parents, Robert and Margaret Sinclair, seeing their daughter so distraught and heavily pregnant brought forth both protective anger and gentle compassion. They offered her the master bedroom while they moved to the smaller guest room. Robert, a retired schoolteacher, spent his days reading to her in hushed tones, hoping to stave off the dark clouds that hung around her. Margaret brewed chamomile tea and prepared her favorite meals, careful to ensure Olivia got the nutrients she needed. But despite their tender care, Olivia sank into bouts of tearful silence. She had never expected her life's fairy tale to unravel so tragically. Meanwhile, at Reeves Global, Alexander's life was a torrent of conflict and regret. Though he had forced Olivia out, he couldn't stop thinking about her. At night, he found himself staring at her side of the bed, where an indent in the mattress still reminded him of how she slept curled up against him. However, whenever the guilt crept too close, he forced it back with Cassandra's help. She was a constant presence now, cooking him breakfasts in the mansion's gleaming kitchen, lounging in a silk robe in the morning sunroom, even redecorating certain rooms to her taste. Yet Alexander couldn't shake a gnawing sense of unease. He had demanded a paternity test from Olivia, but now she was gone. He told himself that if she truly had nothing to hide, she would have agreed. Yet part of him recognized he'd been monstrously unfair, accusing a faithful wife of infidelity while he himself had crossed the boundaries. That dissonance built a wall in his chest, a heaviness he carried into every boardroom meeting and philanthropic event. Cassandra took advantage of his vulnerability. She began dropping hints about her own pregnancy, though she never produced any actual medical records or sonogram images. "You know, if I really am pregnant, we'll need to start thinking about the baby's future," she murmured one evening, stroking Alexander's arm. "We can raise our child in a home free from all the drama." The illusions she spun around a happy family life with him at her side were potent. But Alexander, despite his turmoil, was no fool. He started to notice inconsistencies in Cassandra's narratives, appointments she claimed to have, but never actually attended mornings. She announced bouts of nausea, but was perfectly healthy later in the day. Amid this internal struggle, Alexander received an unexpected call from Elizabeth Harrington, a long-time family friend who had known him since childhood. Elizabeth, known for her no-nonsense demeanor, asked to meet him at a quiet cafe in Manhattan's Upper East Side. Curiosity piqued, he agreed, hoping she might offer some insight or at least a distraction from the chaos of his personal life. When he arrived, Elizabeth wasted no time. She slammed down a series of photos on the table Cassandra in compromising positions with a man clearly not Alexander. One of them showed Cassandra intimately close to the so-called private investigator who had fed Alexander lies about Olivia. Elizabeth's lips thinned in anger. "I got these from a reliable source who has been watching Cassandra Hawthorne for a while. She's not who she says she is, Alexander." Confusion and rage warred in his eyes. "Where did you get these? That's not important. What is important is that you see for yourself. The woman manipulated you. She arranged a con, Alex, and you fell right into her trap. She's exploiting your vulnerabilities, and you threw away Olivia in the process." Shame flooded Alexander, mingling with a surge of defensiveness. He demanded an explanation, any reason that might exonerate him. But the more he asked, the deeper the pit he dug himself into. He recalled the forced investigator meeting the suspicious receipts for exotic spa treatments that never quite matched up to any pregnant woman's routine, and the seeds of doubt Cassandra had planted in his mind about Olivia. The picture was becoming brutally clear. Yet the final blow came later that night, when Cassandra, oblivious to Alexander's new knowledge, let slip a detail about a checkup she was supposedly attending. The date she gave clashed with an evening business event she had attended with him in Chicago. She tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Realizing her slip-up, Cassandra tried to seduce him to distract him from the truth, but he pushed her away, eyes dark with betrayal. "What's the truth, Cassandra?" he asked, voice trembling with suppressed fury. She tried to conjure another lie, but her expression faltered. In a last-ditch effort, she pinned the blame on Olivia. "That woman never deserved you. She's nothing compared to you." Her words only fueled Alexander's revulsion. He saw now how expertly she'd manipulated him, and how willingly he had let it happen. Anguish twisted in his gut as he realized he had lost the woman who truly loved him, all for a seduction built on deceit. Cassandra, sensing the end, tried to appeal to his guilt tears, streaming down her face, but the sincerity of her breakdown was lost on him. In that moment he knew he had to cut ties with her if he wanted any chance at salvaging his life and reclaiming a modicum of self-respect. Olivia's pregnancy complications grew more severe in her third trimester. She experienced high blood pressure and frequent spells of dizziness. Her obstetrician warned that she was at risk for preeclampsia, urging her to take it easy and remain under close medical supervision. Despite her heartbreak, Olivia tried to remain focused on her unborn child. She clung to the hope that the baby would be her solace, a ray of light in her darkest hour. Late one night, about 6 weeks before her due date, Olivia woke to severe abdominal pain and alarming cramping. Alarmed, her parents rushed her to Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan, one of the best facilities for high-risk pregnancies. The doctors diagnosed her with preterm labor, likely induced by the immense stress she had been under. As nurses hooked her to monitors, The baby's heartbeat filled the room in a hurried rhythm that both comforted and frightened her. She was given medication to slow the labor and steroid injections to help the baby's lungs develop. Word of Olivia's hospitalization reached Alexander through Elizabeth Harrington, who had stayed in close contact with the Sinclair family. He arrived at Mount Sinai in the early hours of the morning, his face pale and drawn. Unsure of his reception, he hesitated at the door to Olivia's room. His eyes took in the sight of her, hooked to IV lines. Her face flushed with pain, her brow beaded with sweat. The memory of throwing her out and doubting her fidelity haunted him, making each step toward her bedside feel like walking on shards of glass. Robert Sinclair intercepted him. The older man's eyes blazed with protective anger. "You have no right to be here," he snapped, voice low to avoid disturbing Olivia. Alexander's throat tightened. He nodded slowly. "You're right. I don't. But I need to see her to apologize to be here if she needs anything." Margaret, who had emerged from the hallway, placed a hand on her husband's shoulder. Her voice was tired, but still gentle. "If Olivia asks you to leave, you must respect that." Inside the room, Olivia saw him hesitating at the doorway. Her eyes flickered with a myriad of emotions: hurt, longing, resentment, and an underlying love that refused to vanish despite his betrayal. She turned her head away, tears filling her eyes. Yet something in her core told her that letting him see what he had done to her might finally bring closure, or at least clarity. Alexander approached slowly, tears in his own eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice raw. "I've been a fool." "Cassandra," she lied. "I have proof." He broke down, explaining the manipulations, the forged photos, the false pregnancy claims. "I let my own guilt and her lies twist my mind against you." "I'm so sorry, Olivia." His confession washed over her like a wave. She had suspected as much, but hearing it from his lips forced her to confront the bitterness inside her. Emotional exhaustion combined with the physical pain left her unable to respond with anger. She simply nodded, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. "I don't know what to say," she finally managed. "I don't know if sorry is enough for what you've done." Before Alexander could respond, a sharp pain seized Olivia, forcing her to clutch her stomach. Machines beeped wildly as the nurse rushed in to check on her. The baby's heart rate was dropping, a dangerous sign. Within minutes, doctors converged on the room, deciding an emergency C-section was necessary. Olivia was wheeled away, leaving Alexander in the hallway, numb with fear and guilt. The waiting felt like an eternity. Alexander paced the corridor, ignoring the stares from Margaret and Robert, who couldn't quite bring themselves to forgive him either. Finally, a doctor emerged, removing his surgical mask. "She's stable, and the baby's delivered," he announced. "A boy. Born premature, but breathing on his own. We're taking him to the NICU for further monitoring." A rush of relief and gratitude swept through Alexander. He asked if Olivia was okay to see him. The doctor nodded, cautioning that she needed rest. As he entered the recovery room, he found Olivia pale, her eyes fluttering open. The exhaustion etched into her face was rivaled only by the stoic determination that came from safeguarding her baby. When she saw Alexander, she offered a weary nod. After a series of post-op checks, Olivia agreed to let him accompany her to see their son in the NICU. Tiny, wrapped in tubes and monitors, the infant still managed to grip his father's finger with surprising strength. Alexander's eyes welled with tears as he whispered, "He's perfect. He looks like you." When the nurse offered the chance for a paternity test, emphasizing that it was standard procedure for certain NICU protocols. Alexander's heart lurched. Anxiety warred with a desperate yearning for vindication for both of them. Olivia turned to him, her voice soft yet resolute. "Let's do it. You wanted proof. Now you'll have it." Olivia drifted in and out of uneasy sleep, the antiseptic scent of the maternity ward settling over her like a thin, sterile blanket. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing every surface in a bleak, unwavering glow. Outside the small window beside her bed, dawn bruised the winter sky with palest violet. She could see only a sliver of Manhattan's skyline, but that fragment was enough to remind her of everything that had broken glittering penthouses' gala nights. Alexander's confident laugh echoing through champagne-soaked ballrooms. Now there was only the monotonous beep of a heart rate monitor, the soft hiss of the IV, and the hollow ache where trust had once lived. Alexander sat in a vinyl chair, inches from her bedside shoulders, hunched suit jacket long discarded. 3 nights of vigil had left a grey cast on his skin and carved new lines at the corners of his eyes. He studied Olivia's face as though it were a masterwork in danger of fading. Every flutter of her lashes, every shallow breath, proof she was still here, still reachable. Each time she stirred, guilt pierced him anew. He had memorized the sequence of the ward's sounds, the squeak of nurses' shoes, the squeal of gurney wheels, the distant lullabies drifting from the nursery speakers. Somewhere at the end of the corridor, the NICU doors whispered open and closed with rhythmic finality, each hiss a reminder that their premature son fought his own private battle behind glass. Alexander rose whenever Olivia tried to shift, adjusting her pillows, smoothing tangled sheets, offering sips of water with hands that trembled despite his best effort to appear composed. Words seemed inadequate, yet silence felt like cowardice. He balanced on the edge of both present, but wary, desperate, but patient. The afternoon after their son's birth passed in ragged fragments of time. Olivia's parents came and went, leaving flowers that perfumed the room with hope. Nurses checked vitals, charted numbers, whispered praise about the baby's slow but steady progress. Through it all, Olivia spoke little. Her voice, when used, was soft and functional. "Yes, thank you, I'm fine." She met Alexander's gaze only briefly, as if afraid direct eye contact might reopen a wound that was still actively bleeding. Alexander, for his part, offered apologies in 100 small gestures. He turned off his phone during visiting hours. He fetched her favorite chocolate protein shake from the cafe 2 floors down. When she attempted her first gentle walk along the hallway, he hovered nearby, not touching unless she reached for him, a restraint that cost him every shred of discipline he owned. Late that evening, after Olivia drifted into an exhausted sleep, a nurse slipped into the room. She carried a sealed envelope, cream-colored official heavy with implication. Alexander's pulse hammered. He knew what it contained. The sample swabs had been rushed to the lab the moment Olivia agreed. 2 days, the technician had promised. They had taken less than 30 hours. The nurse set the envelope on the rolling tray table and left without comment. Alexander stared at it as if it might singe the laminate. Part of him longed to tear it open immediately, but some instinct of fairness, perhaps his final scrap of honor, held him back. Olivia needed to be awake. She deserved to witness the truth for herself. So he waited. Morning broke with muted lavender light. Olivia's eyelids fluttered, and she tried to sit up, wincing, as the C-section incision tugged. Alexander was at her side in an instant, adjusting the bed's incline with nervous fingers. She noticed the envelope at once. Its presence seemed to electrify the air between them. "Is that—" Her voice faltered. "Yes." He swallowed. "It arrived last night. I wanted us to open it together." A silence followed, thick and fragile. Olivia reached for this envelope with deliberate calm, but her hand paused mid-air. "You open it," she murmured, eyes never leaving his. "You're the one who needed proof." The words weren't sharp, just painfully honest. Alexander felt them land like stones. He slit the seal with trembling hands and unfolded the single sheet inside. A black and white table of markers and probabilities blurred before his eyes, but one line stood out in bold type. A soft, broken sound escaped him, half sob, half prayer. He turned the page so Olivia could see, even as tears clouded his vision. She read silently, lips pressed tight until the rigid control she'd maintained cracked. Moisture shimmered along her lashes, but no tears fell. She would not grant heartache that final triumph. Alexander knelt beside her bed envelope, trembling in one hand, free hand wrapping around hers. "I was wrong," he whispered, voice raw. "I let lies twist everything good between us. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I will spend the rest of my life making amends if you let me. If you can." Olivia studied him, really studied him for the first time since the night he'd cast her out. Gone was the immaculate titan of industry. This man's suit was wrinkled tie, forgotten hair, mussed eyes, rimmed red. Vulnerability radiated from him in waves so palpable it almost hurt to witness. "You broke something," she said, her voice barely above the beep of the monitor. "Something sacred. I don't know if it can be fixed." She squeezed his hand, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement that the conversation was not yet over. But our son deserves two parents who can look each other in the eye without bitterness. Hope, cautious, tremulous, lit Alexander's features. Then we start there. With him. That afternoon, they entered the neonatal intensive care unit together. The world narrowed to a soft cocoon of beeping machines and incubators glowing with gentle amber light. Their son, only 3 pounds and change, slept beneath a tangle of tubes and wires, chest rising in quick hummingbird gulps. A knitted blue cap donated by a volunteer perched on his head, like a crown too large for its monarch. Olivia's breath hitched. Alexander instinctively wrapped an arm around her, but paused at her slight stiffening. Instead, he offered his forearm for support. She accepted, leaning just enough to take weight off her incision while keeping a fractional distance. A nurse encouraged them to place a hand through the porthole and let the baby curl his fingers around theirs. Alexander's throat closed when the tiny hand, no larger than his thumb, clenched with surprising strength. Warmth, real, visceral, flooded him. This life was theirs, a truth, no doubt, no rumor could erode. Olivia watched father and son, one tear finally slipping free. She brushed it away quickly, but Alexander saw. He didn't speak. Some hurts required silence to breathe. The following morning, Alexander left the hospital briefly. He returned to the Greenwich mansion, now unbearably hollow, and summoned the head of security. Cassandra's access codes were deactivated within the hour. He drafted a terse termination letter informing her, PR firm, their contract was void due to breach of ethics. Her belongings, silk robe, perfume bottles, a pair of crystal-beaded stilettos, were boxed and shipped to an address she'd once bragged about. He placed the DNA results on top sans note. There was nothing more to say. The press, already buzzing with rumors, latched onto photos leaked by Elizabeth Harrington. Cassandra's fabricated empire collapsed almost overnight. Alexander didn't follow the headlines. Public vindication felt hollow next to the private wreckage he'd caused. He sold the Manhattan pied-à-terre where he and Cassandra had met the Board of Temptation. The proceeds went directly into a trust fund under Olivia's sole control security for their son, regardless of what became of Alexander's contrition tour. Back at the Sinclair home, Olivia's world rearranged itself around midnight, feedings, pumping schedules, and whispered consultations with pediatric specialists. Alexander visited daily, but never unannounced. He texted first May. "I come at 2. Brought the prenatal vitamins you like and accepted." No with grace when Olivia needed space. He learned diaper folds, burping rhythms. The delicate art of swaddling. He burned through business podcasts during late-night rocking shifts, believing efficiency could coexist with cradle songs. Once Olivia found him asleep upright in an armchair, their son snoozing against his chest, Alexander's tie serving as an impromptu pacifier strap. The sight cracked something in her she hadn't realized was still frozen. They began speaking not about betrayal at first, but about practicalities, sleep schedules, medication dosages, whether to use cloth or disposable. Conversations grew inch by inch to include memories of their courtship jokes about Alexander's disastrous first attempt at homemade pesto. Olivia's longing to finish her doctorate. Pain surfaced too sharp and unpredictable, but they faced it sometimes in hushed tones after her parents slept, sometimes through the safe proxy of the couple's therapist, Alexander insisted they see. Spring returned, and with it the lilacs that once framed their engagement. Alexander knelt again, not with diamonds, but with sincerity worn shiny by a year of humility. He asked not for absolution, but for the chance to keep trying. Olivia, holding their son, now sturdy laughing curls ruffling in the breeze, met Alexander's gaze. She saw the daily proofs consistent presence therapy appointments never missed. Corporate receptions declined if they pulled him from bedtime stories. Day by day, she said, voice sure. No grand promises. We build the bridge stone by stone. He accepted her terms gratefully, understanding that true forgiveness is not a gift, but a discipline, practiced, renewed, earned. On the final night before Olivia agreed to visit the mansion once more, they sat on her parents' porch. Their son slept in a portable bassinet, nearby night air cool against rosy cheeks. Fireflies flickered over the lawn, like tiny lanterns guiding lost travelers home. Olivia broke the comfortable silence. "Do you ever think about how close we came to losing everything?" "Every hour," Alexander admitted. "It keeps me honest." She turned toward him, eyes reflecting porch-light gold. "Then let the memory stay not as punishment, but as proof that truth matters more than pride and love more than rumor." Alexander nodded. The wind carried the scent of blooming lilac, a fragrance he now associated less with grand proposals and more with second chances hard won. For the first time since the night betrayal shattered their peace, Olivia allowed her head to rest on his shoulder. Alexander closed his eyes, pulse steadying beneath the gentle weight. The path ahead was long unglamorous and utterly worth it. In the distance, Manhattan's skyline shimmered a city of light that had once tempted him into darkness. Tonight it simply looked like a place full of imperfect people, trying, failing, and if fortunate, learning to love better the second time around. Love, trust, betrayal. These threads bind us all in fragile unity. Alexander and Olivia's journey reminds us that no life, however gilded, is impervious to deception. A single lie, whispered by someone with enough cunning, can dismantle even the most steadfast bond. Yet in the wake of heartbreak, redemption can bloom if there is genuine remorse and unwavering resolve to heal. Their story unfolding between hospital corridors and heart-wrenching admissions of guilt ultimately crescendos into a reclaimed love shaped by hardship. If this story moved, you don't keep it to yourself like this video. To let us know you enjoyed it, share it with someone who loves a gripping, true-to-life drama, and subscribe so you never miss another story filled with shocking twists and tender resolutions. Let us stand witness that hope can rise from devastation, and that the truth, however painful, is the only foundation upon which love can truly stand.